Chapter 1. The Weight of Santo Perdido. The pesos were ghosts in my pocket, light and thin, a constant reminder of their own impending disappearance. That's why I took the job. It wasn't a choice made of bravery or morbid curiosity, but one forged in the cold calculus of desperation. My sister Elena's sickness had consumed everything. Our savings, our mother's small inheritance, and finally, Elena herself. Now, all that was left were the debts, monuments of grief as cold and hard as the tombstones I was about to be paid to clean. The town of Santo Perdido, nestled deep in the folds of Oaxaca's mountains, held its breath as the sun bled out behind the peaks. The name meant Saint of the Lost, and I was beginning to understand why. It was a place where traditions clung like moss to stone, where the veil between worlds felt less like a barrier and more like a tattered shroud you could trip through if you weren't careful. Senor Ramirez, the portly municipal functionary who hired me, had the shifty eyes of a man selling a broken clock. We stood before the towering, rusted gates of the Panteón Municipal. No one called it that, though. It was just the Panteón, a word that felt heavier, older. Intricate ironwork, twisted into the forms of weeping angels and skeletal figures, was slowly being devoured by rust and climbing vines. "The hours are from sunset to sunrise," he said, avoiding my gaze by inspecting a loose thread on his guayabera shirt. "Your duties are simple. Keep the pathways clear. And the new arrivals in the morgue, you make sure they are secure. The families can be very particular." He handed me a heavy ring of iron keys, the metal cold against my clammy palm. "Mostly, you clean the tombstones. Use the supplied brushes. No harsh chemicals. Show respect." "What about the last, trabajader?" I asked, the word feeling foreign on my tongue. "Worker." It sounded too simple for a job like this. Ramirez's eyes finally flickered to mine. They were dark, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of something that looked like pity. He left, suddenly. Some people aren't suited for the quiet. The quiet wasn't what worried me. It was the reputation that clung to this place. The whispers in the mercado, the stories traded over lukewarm cervezas about lights seen dancing between the graves, about sounds that had no earthly source. The Panteón de Santo Perdido was the heart of the town's folklore, a library of ghosts. "The morgue is the small stone building at the back," he pointed with his chin. "The office is just inside the gate. Everything you need is there." He cleared his throat, eager to leave. The last rays of sunlight were vanishing, and the air was growing teeth. The Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos, is approaching. The families will come to build their ofrendas. The place must be pristine. It is a matter of pride and respect for the departed. He scurried away without another word, his footsteps echoing a hasty retreat. I was alone with the keys and the encroaching darkness, a breeze smelling of damp earth and the sweet, cloying scent of simpasicil. The marigolds that were already beginning to appear on some graves rattled the iron gate. It sounded like a sigh, with a deep breath that did nothing to calm the frantic hummingbird in my chest. I found the key that fit the massive lock. The gate groaned open, a sound of protest from a century of rust. I stepped inside and the world changed. The temperature dropped several degrees. The sounds of the town, a distant dog, the rumble of a passing truck, vanished, swallowed by an oppressive silence. The office was a small stone shed just to the right of the entrance. It was more of a storage closet. A single bare bulb hung from a frayed wire, casting a sickly yellow light on dusty shelves lined with brushes, buckets, and jugs of water. A rickety cot was pushed against the far wall. It looked like no one had slept in it for a very long time. On a small, crude wooden desk sat three objects. A tall, thick votive candle, a veladora, encased in glass. A small silver charm on a leather cord, a milagro shaped like a pair of watching eyes. And beneath them, a piece of paper, folded many times, stained with something dark and rust-colored that I prayed was not blood. It was crumpled, as if it had been clenched in a fist that my own hand trembled as I unfolded it. The handwriting was a jagged, frantic scrawl. At the top, 2 words, para sobreviver, to survive. And then the rules. Never look directly at the shadows moving between the tombstones after midnight. They are not shadows but sombras vivas, living shadows, that feed on your gaze. Always carry a veladora, votive candle, blessed by a curandero, traditional healer. If it flickers without wind, run to the morgue and lock the door. Do not whistle or sing in the panteon. The almas en pena, restless souls, will mistake it for a call and follow you home. If you hear a child's laughter, do not search for it. It is La Llorona, the weeping woman, and she will drag you to the underworld. Clean only 1 tombstone at a time. Touching 2 at once invites the defuntos, deceased, to rise and speak. Never step on an ofrenda offering altar left by families. Disturbing it angers the spirits, and they will mark you. If the morgue's door creaks open on its own, do not enter. Something inside is awake and waiting. Always wear a milagro, religious charm, around your neck. Without it, the calaveras, skeletons, will see you as one of them. Do not speak the names on the tombstones aloud. Saying their names summons their espiritu, spirit, to your side. If you see a white owl perched on a cross, leave the cemetery immediately. It is an avispa, omen of death. Never turn your back on the morgue's autopsy table. Something lies there that watches you. Before leaving at dawn, offer a prayer to Santa Muerte, Saint Death. Fail to do so, and she will claim you before the next night. I read the list twice, then a 3rd time. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic prisoner. This had to be a joke. A cruel prank played by the previous worker, the one who left suddenly. But as I stood in that suffocating little room, the absolute silence of the pantheon pressing in on me, a cold dread trickled down my spine. The items on the desk, the blessed veladora, the protective milagro, were they part of the joke? Or were they tools left by a man who knew he wasn't going to need them anymore? I looked from the list to the silver eyes of the milagro. I thought of my empty pockets, of the promises I'd made to Elena in her final hours, that I would live, that I would be okay. A prank. It had to be. But what if it wasn't? With a hand that felt disconnected from my body, I slipped the leather cord over my head. The metal was cold against my chest. I picked up the veladora and a box of matches. Prank or not, I had a job to do. And in a place like this, a little light couldn't hurt. Chapter 2. The living shadows. The moon was a sliver of bone, offering little comfort as I ventured into the labyrinth of graves. The pantheon was a city in miniature, a chaotic jumble of weathered stone angels, ornate mausoleums crumbling under the weight of time, and simple wooden crosses, driven into the earth. The air was thick with the scent of marigolds and wet soil, a perfume of death and remembrance. I lit the veladora. The flames sprung to life, small but defiant, casting a warm, dancing circle of light around me. It was my shield. I held it in one hand and a bucket of water and a soft bristled brush in the other. My first task was a large, granite tombstone from the early 20th century, its surface obscured by a film of green moss and grime. The name was almost illegible. I made a point not to try and read it. Rule number 9 echoed in my mind. Do not speak the names. I decided not even thinking them was a safer bet. The work was methodical, grounding. The scrape of the brush, the splash of water, the slow reveal of clean, gray stone beneath the filth. For the first few hours, it was almost peaceful. I focused on the task, on the circular motion of my hand, on the satisfying progress. I could almost convince myself this was just a job. An unusual, nocturnal job, but a job nonetheless. The list of rules felt like a distant, half-remembered dream. Then the church bell in the distant town square chimed 12 times. Midnight. The change was instantaneous and profound. The air, already cool, plunged into a deep, biting cold that pierced my thin jacket. The gentle night sounds, the chirp of crickets, the rustle of leaves, died all at once, leaving a vacuum of absolute silence. It was a held breath, my own breath plumed in front of me, a ghostly cloud in the candlelight. That's when I saw it. In my peripheral vision, to the left, between the tomb of a forgotten general and a small, sorrowful angel marking a child's grave, a shadow detached itself from the base of a mausoleum. It wasn't a shadow cast by anything. It was the thing itself. It stretched, elongated, and then flowed like ink spilled on black cloth, moving with a silent, unnatural fluidity. Rule number 1 screamed in my head. Never look directly at the shadows moving between the tombstones. They are not shadows but sombras vivas, living shadows, that feed on your gaze. Every instinct I possessed urged me to snap my head to the left, to face the impossibility, to confirm what my eyes were telling me. The temptation was a physical thing, a magnetic pull on my senses. I could feel its presence, a cold spot in the air, a hum at the edge of hearing. I imagined it turning, sensing my awareness, its featureless form fixing on me. I clenched my jaw, my knuckles white on the handle of the brush. I forced my eyes to remain fixed on the granite tombstone in front of me. I scrubbed with a frantic energy I didn't know I had. My focus narrowed to a single point, the letter R I was currently cleaning. I scrubbed until the stone was raw, until my muscles burned. I did not look. I would not look. After what felt like an eternity, the feeling of being watched began to recede. The profound cold lessened its grip, and slowly, the crickets started their hesitant song once more. I dared a glance, not to the left, but straight ahead. The path was empty. The world seemed normal again, but the knowledge of what I hadn't seen was now seared into my brain. The predecessor wasn't joking. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the brush. I felt a desperate, childish urge to make a sound, to whistle a tune my mother used to sing, to fill the suffocating silence with something human. The first notes were already forming on my lips when rule number 3 slammed the door shut on the impulse. Do not whistle or sing in the panteon. The almas en pena, restless souls, will mistake it for a call and follow you home. The thought of one of these things, following me back to my small, lonely room, was more terrifying than facing them here. I swallowed the tune, the silence rushing back in to reclaim its throne. The night was young, and I had already been tested twice. A chilling thought occurred to me. The rules were not just warnings. They were a syllabus for a class I couldn't afford to fail. Chapter 3. The morgue's decree. My duties included the morgue. Ramirez had been vague, mentioning only that I should ensure it was secure. The building was a squat, windowless block of concrete at the far end of the panteon, separated from the graves by a dying patch of grass. It looked less like a building and more like a tomb itself. The walk there was a new kind of terror. Every shadow seemed to writhe with potential. Every gust of wind sounded like a whisper. I held the veladora out in front of me like a talisman, its small flame my only comfort in the oppressive dark. The key to the morgue was colder than the others. It turned in the lock with a grating shriek that set my teeth on edge. The heavy metal door swung inward, revealing a darkness that seemed thicker than the night outside. And a smell, a sharp chemical scent of formaldehyde layered over something else. Something older. The smell of cold, still meat. I stepped inside. An emotion-activated fluorescent light flickered on overhead, buzzing erratically. The room was stark, clinical, and horrifyingly intimate. White-tiled walls, stained yellow in the corners. A stainless steel sink. A row of refrigerated lockers, their metal doors gleaming coldly. And in the center of the room, an autopsy table. It was covered by a white sheet. A distinct, human-shaped lump lay beneath it. Ramirez had mentioned a new arrival. An old woman named Elodia Flores, dead from what the town doctor called natural causes. Rule number 11 surfaced from the dark waters of my memory. Never turn your back on the morgue's autopsy table. Something lies there that watches you. I felt a cold prickle crawl up the back of my neck. The sheet was perfectly still. The room was silent save for the angry buzz of the light. Yet the feeling of being observed was overwhelming. It was coming from the table. I shuffled sideways, keeping my body angled towards it as I checked the clipboard hanging from a hook on the wall. The paperwork confirmed it. Elodia Flores, age 92. Cause of death: heart failure. My job was to ensure the lockers were sealed and the premises were undisturbed. I checked the handles on the occupied locker, locker 3. It was locked tight. The others were empty. The whole check took less than a minute in which I never once allowed the autopsy table to leave my sight line. I moved in a strange sideways crab walk, my head turned at an awkward angle. I must have looked insane. I felt insane that I was about to back out of the room when it happened. The flame of my veladora, which had been steady and true inside the windless morgue, suddenly spasmed. It didn't just flicker. It leaped and contorted, shrinking down to a tiny blue nub before flaring up violently, casting my shadow, monstrous and dancing, against the tiled wall. Rule number 2. If it flickers without wind, run to the morgue and lock the door. A paradox. I was already in the morgue. The rule implied the morgue was a sanctuary from a threat outside. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead. Did I run out? Or did the rule mean to stay put? The violent, unnatural dance of the flame told me this was not a drill. Whatever the threat was, it was close. Sanctuary. The word echoed in my mind. This cold, sterile room was the safe place. A sound from outside galvanized me. A low, guttural moan that seemed to vibrate through the very concrete of the floor. It was followed by a dry, scraping sound, like fingernails dragging across stone. I didn't wait for a second invitation. I lunged for the heavy metal door, slammed it shut, and threw the thick iron bolt across. The sound of it seating into place was a thunderclap in the small room. My back was pressed against the cold metal, my breath coming in ragged gasps. And then I realized my mistake. In my panic to secure the door, I had turned my back on the autopsy table. I spun around, my heart seizing in my chest. The room was exactly as it had been. The sheet was still. The light still buzzed. Nothing had moved. But the feeling of being watched was now suffocating. It had intensified, sharpened to a razor's edge. It was a hateful, intelligent presence, and I had locked myself inside with it. Outside, the scraping sound grew louder, more frantic. It was right at the door now. Scratch, scrape, moaned that I was trapped between two horrors. The known, clawing at the door, and the unknown, lying silently on the table a few feet away, watching me. The blessed veladora in my hand was my only shield, and its flame was still flickering, a frantic, silent scream. Chapter 4. The stillness and the sound. My back was flat against the cold iron of the morgue door. The bolt I had thrown felt laughably inadequate. Outside, the scraping continued, a patient, persistent sound like an animal trying to claw its way into a tomb. Inside, there was only the electric hum of the failing light and the frantic thunder of my own heart, and the silence from the table that I had broken. Rule number 11. Never turn your back on the morgue's autopsy table. The rule wasn't a suggestion. It was an absolute, written in the same desperate hand as the others. I had turned. In my terror, I had forgotten that I pivoted slowly, my muscles screaming in protest, my body expecting a blow, a shape lunging from the shadows, a final, horrifying confirmation. But there was nothing. The white sheet lay undisturbed. The lump beneath it, the earthly vessel of Elodia Flores, was exactly as it had been. Still, inert. But the feeling, the pressure in the room had changed. The sense of being watched was no longer a passive observation. It was active, malevolent, and focused entirely on me. It was the predatory stillness of a viper before it strikes. The air around the table seemed to shimmer, to thicken with a palpable weight. Rule number 11 wasn't about what would happen in the instant you turned. It was about the invitation you extended. I had told the thing on the table that I was no longer watching. I had given it permission to move, and now I was locked inside with it. The scraping at the door ceased. For a moment, I allowed myself a sliver of hope that the creature outside had given up. The hope was immediately suffocated by a new sound, one that chilled me far deeper than any monstrous scratching. It was the sound of weeping. A woman's cry, thin and ethereal, carried on a wind that could not penetrate these concrete walls. It was a sound of profound, bottomless grief. It rose and fell in a desolate melody, weaving through the buzzing of the fluorescent light. It was a sound every child in Santo Perdido grew up hearing stories about. "Ay, Mis Hios!" The cry was faint, but the words were unmistakable. "Oh, my children, La Llorona," the weeping woman. My grandmother used to tell us her story to keep us from wandering near the river after dark. A beautiful woman who, in a fit of rage and despair, had drowned her own children and was now cursed to search for them for eternity, weeping her grief into the night. They said if you heard her cry, you had to run, to hide, to cover your ears. Rule number 4 flashed in my mind, a beacon of terror. If you hear a child's laughter, do not search for it. It is La Llorona, and she will drag you to the underworld. The rule spoke of laughter, a detail that made the legend even more perverse. But this was her cry, her signature. Did the rule apply? Was this a different manifestation? As the mournful wail echoed again, closer this time, it was followed by something else. A faint, high-pitched sound, like the ghost of a giggle. It was so quiet I thought I'd imagined it, a trick of my frayed nerves. But it was there, a cruel counterpoint to the sorrow. The weeping woman, her grief so deep it had curdled into a kind of madness. My eyes darted to the single, grime-caked window high on the wall, a small rectangle showing only blackness. I had an overwhelming urge to look, to see if some spectral figure in white was drifting between the tombstones. I fought it down. The rules were absolute. Do not search for it, so I stood, a statue of fear, pinned between 3 points of terror. The memory of the thing at the door, the sound of a legendary spirit hunting for souls, and the silent, watching thing on the table in front of me. I kept my eyes locked on the white sheet, my sanity fraying with every passing second. The Veladora flame, my one holy comfort, continued its spastic dance, a reflection of the chaos erupting in the spirit world around me. Time ceased to have meaning. I was suspended in a thick amber of dread. The weeping faded, the scraping did not return. The only sound was the buzz of the light overhead. And then I saw it. It was small. So small I almost missed it. A slight tremor in the fabric of the sheet, right over the area where a chest would be. I held my breath, my eyes watering from the strain of not blinking. It happened again. A slow, deliberate indentation in the sheet, as if it were being gently pulled down. Then, an equally slow rise. It was breathing. The thing on the table under the sheet was breathing. My blood ran cold, turning to slush in my veins. This wasn't a restless espiritu or a weeping ghost. This was physical. This was flesh. Elodia Flores, age 92, cause of death heart failure, was drawing breath in the cold, dead silence of the morgue. A scream built in my throat, hot and sharp, but I choked it down, terrified of what sound might draw from the thing on the table. The silent, watching presence I'd felt was not a ghost hovering over a corpse. It was the corpse itself. It was awake, and thanks to me, it knew I was no longer watching its every move. It was patient. It was waiting. Chapter 5. The Pact of Dust and Dawn. I don't know how long I stood there, mesmerized by the slow, horrifying rhythm of the rising and falling sheet. Each breath it took seemed to steal one from my own lungs. The night stretched into a taut wire of suspense. My vigil was absolute. I did not move. I did not blink. I did not turn away. My entire universe had shrunk to the space between me and that terrible table. The first hint of dawn was not a sight but a feeling, a subtle lessening of the oppressive weight in the room. The veladora's flame, which had flickered in terror all night, finally calmed, its golden light becoming steady and warm once more. The angry buzz of the fluorescent fixture above seemed to soften that I risked a glance at the high window. A faint, bruised purple was beginning to stain the edges of the blackness. Dawn was coming. I had survived. The breathing under the sheet had stopped. I watched for a full 5 minutes, my eyes burning, but the fabric remained perfectly still. Had I imagined it? Was it a hallucination brought on by sheer terror and exhaustion? No, it was real. I knew it in my bones. It had simply chosen to stop, to return to its illusion of death. With trembling hands, I slid the bolt back. The sound was deafening. I pulled the heavy door open and was met with the cool, clean air of the morning. The panteón was quiet, washed in the soft, gray light of pre-dawn. The tombstones were just stones again. The shadows were just shadows. There were no scratches on the morgue door, no sign of the weeping woman. It was as if the horrors of the night had been a fever dream, erased by the coming sun. But I knew better. The fear was a physical thing, a cold knot in my stomach. The milagro on my chest felt heavier. My work wasn't done. As I stumbled back towards the entrance, my body aching with a unique exhaustion that was more soul-deep than muscular, I remembered the final rule. Number 12. Before leaving at dawn, offer a prayer to Santa Muerte. Fail to do so, and she will claim you before the next night. Near the main gate, tucked into an alcove in the crumbling stone wall, was a small, makeshift shrine. I had noticed it yesterday. It was adorned with fresh simpasicil, a glass of water, and a single unlit candle. In the center was a small, crudely carved wooden statue of a skeleton cloaked in a robe, holding a tiny scythe. Santa Muerte, Saint Death. She was not a saint recognized by the church, but here, in the forgotten corners of Santo Perdido, her power was undisputed. She was a protector of the desperate, the marginalized, the ones who lived in the shadows. People like me. Last night, my prayer had been an awkward, fearful gesture. This morning, it was a desperate transaction. I knelt on the damp earth, my head bowed. I didn't have formal words. I just spoke from the terrified heart of me. Santissima Muerte. I whispered, my voice hoarse. I have respected your domain. I have followed the rules. I ask for your protection. Let me see the sun again. I promised her a fresh candle, a better offering. I promised her my devotion. It felt like signing a contract written in dust and feared as I finished. A sense of calm, as cold and final as the grave itself, settled over me. It wasn't peace. It was an understanding. I had paid my dues for the night. My subscription to life had been renewed for another 24 hours. That I gathered my bucket and brush and walked out of the panteón, not daring to look back. The town was beginning to stir. The smell of wood smoke and fresh tortillas drifted from open doorways. It felt like another world. As I rounded the corner onto the main street, a figure blocked my path. It was an old woman, her face a roadmap of wrinkles, her back bent with age. She wore a black rebozo shawl over her head and leaned heavily on a gnarled wooden cane. Her eyes, however, were sharp and black as obsidian. She was Elena Mendoza, the town's curandera, the one who people went to for herbal remedies, for blessings, and for protection against the evil eye. She looked at me, her gaze sweeping from my haggard face down to the silver milagro resting on my chest. "Susto," she said, her voice raspy like dry leaves. It wasn't a question. The fear that steals the soul. I see it on you. The panteón has tasted it. I couldn't speak. I just stared at her. The one before you, he thought the rules were a game, she continued, tapping her cane on the cobblestones. He broke one, then another. He whistled a song his mother taught him. He thought it would give him courage. She paused, her dark eyes holding mine. The almas en pena took his voice first. Then they took the rest of him home. The rules are not suggestions, boy. They are a pact. An old, deep pact. You keep your side of the bargain, and maybe they will keep theirs. She reached out a dry, bony hand and tapped the veladora I was still clutching. The candle I blessed for you is strong, but it will not last forever. Nothing does in that place. Without another word, she turned and shuffled away, her cane tapping a slow, rhythmic beat that sounded like a clock ticking down. I stood frozen, her words echoing in my mind. The fear I felt wasn't just for the shadows and the ghosts. It was for the pact. What happened if I failed? What price would I pay? I walked back to my small, rented room as the sun climbed higher, painting the sky in brilliant strokes of orange and pink. But I saw none of its beauty. All I could see was the gentle rise and fall of a white sheet in a dark room. All I could hear was a woman's weeping on the wind. Sleep would not come. There was no escape. The sun was just a temporary reprieve. The night was waiting to reclaim me. Chapter 6. A Name in the Stone. The third night, I arrived at the gates of the panteón a hollowed-out man. Sleep had been a distant country I could not reach, its borders guarded by the memory of a breathing corpse and a weeping ghost. I moved through my daylight hours in a fog of exhaustion and caffeine, my thoughts returning again and again to the 12 rules. They were no longer a list. They were a litany, a prayer, a razor's edge on which I was forced to walk. The Carandra, Elena Mendoza, had been right. The fear, the susto, had taken root in me. It was a cold parasite in my gut, feeding on my dwindling courage. But the debts remained. The memory of my promise to my sister remained. And so, I returned. Tonight, my prayer to Santa Muerte was not a plea but a bargain. I left a new, thick white candle and a small glass of tequila at her shrine, an offering of light and fire. "Keep me from your embrace for one more night," I whispered, "and I will honor you again at dawn." My assigned task was in the oldest section of the cemetery, a place where the tombstones were crumbling into illegibility and the earth seemed to be actively trying to swallow its dead. Here, the air was thickest, the silence most profound. My veladora, its blessed flame a small comfort, cast long, dancing shadows that my weary mind insisted on seeing as the sombras vivas. I kept my eyes fixed forward, focusing on the small circle of my own world. One tomb stood apart from the others. It was a mausoleum, small but built of a dark, volcanic stone that seemed to drink the moonlight. It was clearly once the tomb of a wealthy family, but it had fallen into profound neglect. A thick, scaly blanket of dark green lichen covered the facade, obscuring whatever name was carved there. My job was to clean it. The work was hard. The lichen clung to the stone with a stubborn, living grip. I scraped and scrubbed, my muscles burning, my mind numb with the repetitive motion. For a while, the physical exertion was a blessing. It silenced the frantic chorus of fear in my head. There was only the scrape of the wire brush, the smell of damp stone, and the slow, satisfying reveal of the clean surface beneath that I became obsessed with the name. The letters were ornate, deeply carved, a statement of pride and power. I worked at them with a singular focus, chipping away the grime of decades. First, an I, then a G, and then the work consumed me. The pantheon and its terrors faded away. There was only the stone and the secret it held. Finally, after what felt like an hour, the last bit of lichen flaked away. The name was revealed, stark and proud in the candlelight. Ignacio. A wave of satisfaction washed over me. I had conquered the stone. I had brought the name back into the light. Without thinking, my mind dulled by labor and fatigue, I spoke it aloud, a soft, reverent whisper into the vast silence. Ignacio. The word hung in the air for a single heartbeat. Then the world shattered. The temperature plunged as if a door to a frozen hell had been thrown open. An Arctic cold seized me, so intense it felt like a physical blow, driving the air from my lungs in a painful gasp. At the exact same moment, the blessed flame of my Veladora was snuffed out. Not flickered, not sputtered. It vanished instantly, plunging me into a profound and terrifying darkness. The moonlight, which had seemed so bright moments before, was now gone, swallowed by a darkness that emanated from the mausoleum itself. And from within the stone tomb, a sound. A low, deep, grating scrape. The sound of a stone lid, sealed for a century, being pushed aside from the inside. That I had broken rule number 9. Do not speak the names on the tombstones aloud. Saying their names summons their espiritu, spirit, to your side. That I had not just summoned a spirit. I had awakened something that had been deliberately put to sleep. Chapter 7. The shape in the dark. Panic gave me wings. My hands, numb with cold, fumbled for the box of matches in my pocket. The first match I struck broke. The second flared, its tiny light a defiant star in the crushing dark. In its brief, trembling light, I saw it. The heavy stone door of Ignacio's mausoleum was now open, a crack no wider than my hand, from which poured a darkness so absolute it felt solid. That I finally managed to relight the Veladora. Its flame was pathetic, a tiny, sputtering thing that threatened to die at any moment. It offered no warmth, only a feeble circle of light that the oppressive darkness seemed to press in on from all sides. I ran. I turned from the tomb and fled, stumbling over sunken graves and tangled roots. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to get away from that place. A sound followed me, the soft crunch of a footstep on gravel, always just behind me. When I stopped to listen, it stopped. When I ran, it followed. I was being stalked. This was different from the sombras vivas, which felt like territorial predators. This was personal. This was intelligent. I risked a glance over my shoulder. At the very edge of my candlelight, I saw him, a shape, tall, impossibly thin, a silhouette of a man in old-fashioned clothing. He stood perfectly still, his form indistinct, a smudge of deeper black against the night. The moment my eyes fixed on him, he dissolved, melting back into the shadows between the tombs. He was toying with me, hunting me, the spirit of Ignacio. The panteón was no longer a place of general menace. It had become a hunting ground, and I was the prey. The entity of Ignacio seemed to have an authority here. He herded me, cutting off paths, forcing me down narrow corridors between crumbling walls. I had to pay attention to everything at once. I nearly stumbled against a second tombstone while steadying myself, catching myself just before breaking rule number 5. A whisper slithered through the air, sounding unervingly like a child's giggle, trying to draw my eyes from my path. A cruel twist on rule #4. My only hope was the morgue, the one place the rules designated as a sanctuary. If I could get there, lock the door, I could wait out the night. I sprinted toward the back of the cemetery, my lungs burning, the footsteps of my pursuer a constant, terrifying echo. I saw the squat concrete building ahead, a block of brutalist hope in the night. But as I drew closer, my heart sank. The heavy iron door, the one I had bolted so securely the night before, was ajar. It hung open, creaking slowly back and forth in a breeze I couldn't feel. Rule number 7. If the morgue's door creaks open on its own, do not enter. Something inside is awake and waiting. Ignacio's spirit had somehow done this. Or perhaps, the breathing thing on the table had opened it, an invitation to its newly awakened kin. The sanctuary had been compromised. There was nowhere left to run, nowhere left to hide. I was trapped outside, in the open, with a hunter who knew every shadow and a night that seemed to have no end. Chapter 8. The Curse of the Nawal. I survived until dawn by becoming a ghost myself. I never stopped moving, weaving through the maze of graves, my sputtering Veladora held before me. The spirit of Ignacio stalked me the entire night, a constant presence at the edge of my vision, a whisper just at the edge of my hearing. It was a torturous game of cat and mouse that stretched my sanity to its breaking point. When the first gray light of dawn finally broke the horizon, the presence vanished. The air warmed. The footsteps ceased. I was alone. My prayer to Santa Muerte that morning was not a bargain. It was the desperate, weeping plea of a broken man. I didn't ask for protection. I begged for forgiveness. I had broken the pact. I knew I couldn't face another night. Not like that. There was only one person who might have an answer. I found the curandera, Elena Mendoza, tending to a small garden of herbs behind her humble home. The air was thick with the scent of mint and chamomile. She looked up as I approached, and her dark eyes showed no surprise, only a deep, weary sorrow. "You broke the pact," she stated. It wasn't a question. I said a name. I confessed, my voice cracking. I was cleaning a mausoleum. The name was Ignacio, a sharp intake of breath. The curandera dropped the small trowel she was holding and made a sign against evil over her heart. She looked at me with genuine fear. "Madre de Dios, you did not just summon an alma en pena, a restless soul. You have knocked on the door of the devil who sleeps in our soil." She led me inside her home, a dark, cool space filled with the smells of drying herbs, beeswax, and something else, something ancient and sacred. She sat me down at a small wooden table and lit a stick of copal incense, its fragrant smoke curling towards the ceiling. "Ignacio de la Cruz was not just a man," she began, her voice low and grave. "He was the patron of this valley more than a century ago, rich, cruel, and powerful. But his power did not come from his money. He was a Nahual." The word sent a shiver through me, a shapeshifter, a sorcerer. "He could take the form of a great, black dog with eyes of fire," she said. "He used his power to terrorize the people, to steal land, to inflict suffering for his own amusement. When he finally died, the whole town rejoiced. But his evil was too strong to simply pass on. The town's elders, with the help of a powerful curandero from the mountains, performed a ritual to bind his espiritu to his tomb, to lock him within his own stone and bone." She leaned forward, her eyes intense. But the ritual came with a price. Ignacio's malevolence had poisoned the very ground of the panteón. His curse bled out, creating a place of profound spiritual sickness. It is his evil that keeps the other spirits restless. It is his darkness that gives form to the sombras vivas. The creature in your morgue is likely a soul he corrupted in life, now bound to him in death. The rules the old worker left you, they are not mere superstitions. They are the words of the binding spell itself. Each rule is a lock on Ignacio's cage. "And you," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper, "you have just undone the main bolt." The full weight of my mistake crashed down on me. I hadn't just endangered myself. I had started to unravel the very thing that was keeping a centuries-old evil contained. "Can it be fixed?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Perhaps," she said slowly. "The binding can be restored, strengthened. But it must be done on the one night of the year when the veil between worlds is at its thinnest. The one night he is at his most powerful, but also most vulnerable. It must be done on Dia de los Muertos. The Day of the Dead was less than 2 weeks away. Surviving until then will be your penance," she said. "Ignacio will not let you rest. He is bound to you now, but there is a sliver of hope. To complete the new binding, we need specific items, talismans that can counter his power. An object of his vanity, an object of his cruelty, and an object of his death. The legends say they are hidden, some in the pantheon, some in the town. You must find them." She looked at me, her face grim. "You have awakened the shepherd of this flock of horrors, Javier. Now you must find the tools to put him back in his pen, or his curse will consume you." And then all of Santo Perdido. Chapter 9. The Hound of the Damned. The night after the Carandra's revelation was different. The panteón was no longer waiting. It was actively hostile. The pact was broken, the rules a memory of a time when the horrors were, at least, predictable. Now, the evil had a name, and that name was Ignacio. And he knew I was coming for him, that I returned to the cemetery with the Carandra's first clue burning in my mind. He admired his reflection, not in glass, but in the tears of the wealthy. An object of vanity, she had said, hidden where status and sorrow met. The moment I stepped past the gate, a low growl echoed from the deepest part of the cemetery. It was not the sound of any stray dog. It was a deep, guttural rumble that vibrated through the soles of my shoes, a sound of pure malevolence. The Nahual that I held my relit veladora high, its flame, blessed again by Elena Mendoza, burning brighter than before. But the darkness it pushed back felt heavier, thicker. And in that darkness I saw them, 2 points of amber light, glowing with intelligent hatred. Eyes. Then the form took shape. A great black dog, larger than any wolf, with fur that seemed woven from shadow itself. Its movements were unnaturally fluid as it detached itself from the side of a mausoleum. It wasn't just a dog. It was a rip in the fabric of the night. This was the shape Ignacio took to terrorize the living, and now he would use it to hunt me. He didn't charge. He stalked, a shadowy predator circling his prey. I backed away, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. My quest was to search the opulent tombs of the families Ignacio had ruined, but doing so meant turning my back on the hound, entering enclosed spaces. The hunt was on. I spent the first hour in a terrifying dance, ducking behind stone angels, using the labyrinthine paths to break the creature's line of sight. The growl was my constant companion. Several times, it lunged, a blur of black fury, forcing me to scramble over low stone walls, the snap of its jaws echoing inches from my heels that I finally reached the grand, crumbling tomb of the Castellano family, who, as the legend went, had lost their fortune to Ignacio's schemes. Taking a desperate chance while the hound circled a section of crypts to my left, I slipped inside the mausoleum's unlocked, groaning door. The air inside was stale and thick with the dust of a century. The clue, reflection in tears. My light fell upon the stone sarcophagi. Nothing. Then I saw it. A loose floor tile, its corners slightly raised. Prying it up with trembling fingers, I reached into the darkness beneath. My hand closed around something cold and metallic that it was a silver cigar case, heavy and ornate. On its polished surface, so pristine it could still serve as a mirror, was a single elegantly engraved initial. This was it, the object of his vanity. Clutching it, I bolted from the tomb. As I burst into the open, the Nahual hound let out a furious roar. It knew I had taken something. It was no longer hurting me. It was trying to kill me. As I sprinted towards the main gate, I glanced at the distant morgue. The single, bare light above its door was flickering violently, a Morse code of terror, a low, wretched moan, the sound of something heavy and wet being dragged across concrete, carried from it. The morgue was a barometer for Ignacio's rage, and a storm was building inside. Chapter 10. An offering to the lost. I presented the cigar case to the Carandra at dawn. Her small house was a sanctuary of light and fragrant herbs against the encroaching darkness I carried with me. She placed the silver case inside a wooden box lined with black velvet and sprinkled it with salt. "This is the first key," she said, her gaze heavy with concern. "But in taking it, you have stirred the hornet's nest. Ignacio's evil agitates the other almas en pena. They are caught between his fury and your trespass. They are confused, afraid. They will see you as part of the sickness." "What can I do?" I asked, my voice raw. "His curse starves them of peace. You must feed them," she instructed. "You will perform an offering, a small echo of Dia de los Muertos. It will not save you from the Nahual, but it may calm the sea you are swimming in. Her instructions were precise. I was to take a loaf of pan de muerto, the sweet bread of the dead, and the petals of fresh simpasical flowers, their vibrant orange color said to be a guide for spirits. At the 4 cardinal corners of the panteón, I was to create a small, temporary ofrenda, a circle of marigold petals, a piece of the bread in the center, and a prayer for the forgotten souls, the almas en pena with no one left to remember them. That night, the task felt impossible. The Nahual was waiting. His howls echoed through the cemetery, closer and more frequent than before. My mission was no longer just to survive, but to carry out a sacred ritual in the heart of a war zone. The northern corner was first, near a crumbling wall bordering the wild hills. As I knelt to lay the petals, the hound burst from the shadows. I threw the first piece of bread as a desperate diversion and scrambled away, the circle barely complete. The eastern corner, near the main gate, was next. This time, I heard his claws on the stone path behind me as I whispered the prayer for peace. I finished just as his shadowy form lunged, and I threw myself sideways, rolling behind a massive stone cruise. The southern corner was the hardest. It bordered the morgue. The air here was freezing, and the moans from within the stone building were louder now, a constant, wretched chorus. The Nahual seemed reluctant to approach the morgue, circling at a distance, its amber eyes blazing with a mixture of hatred for me and a strange fear of whatever was in that place. I hastily made the offering, my hands shaking so badly I could barely form the circle of petals. The final corner was in the west, the oldest part of the cemetery where Ignacio's tomb stood like a black heart. He was waiting for me there. As I placed the last piece of pan de muerto, he charged. There was nowhere to run. I braced for the impact, for the feeling of teeth and darkness. But then, a strange thing happened. A soft whisper, not from Ignacio, but from all around me. A chorus of faint sighs. The air shimmered. The oppressive weight of 100 angry spirits lessened, replaced by a deep, ancient sorrow. For a heartbeat, the Nahual slowed, confused, its head cocked as if listening to sounds I could not hear. It was enough. I scrambled back, leaving the final offering complete. The hunt was not over, but the terrain had shifted. The countless other spirits were no longer a threat. They were silent observers, pacified by a simple act of remembrance. Now it was just me and the hound. Chapter 11. The cellar below, 2 remain. The Karandra said the next day as she secured the second item from the list. A small, rusted iron cattle brand, shaped into Ignacio's eye, the object of cruelty. She had sent me for it with another cryptic clue. His cruelty was a signature on the backs of the poor, and a terrifying suggestion that it might be found in the oldest storage areas of the Pantheon, the cellars beneath the morgue. Walking towards the morgue that night felt like walking to my own execution. The Nahual still stalked the grounds, but a new, more immediate terror awaited me. The rules had taught me to fear this place, but the quest now demanded I enter it. The door was closed and bolted, not creaking open. A loophole I clung to like a prayer. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The cold was a physical presence. The air was thick with the smell of decay and a sweet, cloying odor I couldn't identify. My eyes went immediately to the autopsy table. The white sheet was no longer covering a body. It was crumpled and thrown to the floor. The table itself was bare, gleaming wetly under the buzzing fluorescent light. My blood turned to ice. It wasn't on the table. Then I heard it, a low, wet, gurgling sound. It was coming from Locker 3, the locker that was supposed to contain the body of Elodia Flores. The locker I had confirmed was sealed tight on my first night. The heavy metal door of the locker was slightly ajar, a dark crack leaking an unimaginable stench. Ignoring the rising panic, I found the door to the cellar at the back of the room. It was a low, wooden door I hadn't noticed before. I pulled it open and descended a set of steep stone steps into the darkness below, leaving the horror of the main room behind me. The The cellar was small and damp, filled with forgotten tools and crumbling wooden shelves. I found the brand quickly, half buried in the dirt floor. I had it, the second object. A wave of relief washed over me as I turned to leave. The cellar door overhead slammed shut with a deafening boom. I was plunged into absolute, suffocating blackness. Trapped. Panic seized me. I scrambled up the steps and threw my shoulder against the door, but it wouldn't budge. It was barred from the other side, and from the morgue above, a new sound began. A slow, agonizing screech of metal on concrete. The sound of the locker door, the door to locker 3, being deliberately, patiently, scraped all the way open. A wet, dragging sound followed. The sound of something heavy and saturated pulling itself free. The thing from the locker was out, and I was trapped in the cellar directly beneath it. Chapter 12. The thing on the stairs. Trapped. The word was a tomb. The cellar was absolute black, smelling of damp earth and my own rising panic. Above me, the sounds were the stuff of nightmares. The wet, dragging scrape of the thing from locker 3, the thing that was once Elodia Flores, was now moving about the morgue. It was free. I threw my shoulder against the thick wooden door again and again, but it was like striking a stone wall. It had been barred from the outside. A splinter of wood pierced my cheek, and I tasted the salt of my own blood. I was going to die here, in the dark, listening to that thing above me. Then I heard it approach the cellar door. A low, gurgling breath, right on the other side. It was listening for me. Desperate, I scrambled away from the stairs, my hands sweeping the stone walls. There had to be another way out. My fingers brushed against something different. A section of the foundation where the mortar had crumbled to sand, leaving the stones loose. It looked like an old coal chute, sealed up decades ago. With frantic strength born of pure terror, I clawed at the stones. My fingernails broke, my hands bled, but I pulled one stone free, then another, opening a narrow, claustrophobic tunnel to the outside. I squeezed through the hole, scraping my back and shoulders, and tumbled out onto the damp earth of the panteón. Gasping for air, I had emerged just behind the morgue. And I was not alone. It stood there, silhouetted against the weak moonlight, the form of an old woman, bent and twisted. Its skin was a mottled gray, slick with a foul-smelling fluid. Its jaw hung open in a permanent, silent scream, and its eyes were milky white, seeing nothing and everything. It was the corrupted corpse of Elodia Flores, animated by Ignacio's curse. It turned its head with a wet, cracking sound, its dead eyes fixing on me. It shuffled forward, its movements a grotesque parody of life. I was paralyzed, my mind unable to process the sheer wrongness of it. But before it could reach me, a blur of shadow and fury erupted from the side. The Nahual hound, Ignacio's spirit, slammed into the creature. The two horrors tumbled to the ground in a tangle of rotten flesh and supernatural darkness. The hound was not saving me. It was an act of supreme, possessive arrogance. Ignacio wanted to be the one to kill me. This puppet, this lesser horror, would not steal his prize. The creature from the morgue let out a gurgling shriek as the Nahual's shadow jaws tore at it. The distraction was all I needed. Clutching the iron brand, I fled into the night, the sounds of the two monsters fighting behind me, a symphony of my own personal hell. Chapter 13. The saint of last resorts, you have the brand of his cruelty and the case for his vanity, the Karandra said, her face grim in the light of her candle-filled home. I had stumbled to her door at dawn, a wild-eyed ghost of a man. Only one object remains, the object of his death. What is the clue? I asked, my voice a hoarse whisper. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw not just sorrow, but a deep, profound fear. There is no riddle for this one, only a truth. His final breath was not taken by man or God, but by the saint of last resorts, Santa Muerte. The truth crashed down on me with the force of a physical blow. The rules, the shrine, my nightly prayers. It was all connected. Ignacio was a powerful Nawal, she explained, her voice barely audible. He feared nothing but the finality of death, and so he made a pact with the only power he believed could control it. He went to the shrine of Santa Muerte and offered her a deal. A deal? He offered her eternal dominion over the souls of the panteón. In exchange, he would not die. He would be allowed to remain, a king in his own ghostly kingdom, his spirit bound to the grounds, immortal. Santa Muerte. She is not good or evil. She is a power of balance and bargains. She accepted his offer, but on her own terms. The 12 rules. They weren't wards to keep Ignacio in. They were the terms and conditions of his pact with death itself. They were Santa Muerte's laws for her new domain, laws to test the living, to enforce a strange, terrible kind of order. Ignacio wasn't her prisoner. He was her first and most powerful subject. And the object of his death? I asked, already knowing the answer. The symbol of the pact itself, the Karandra whispered. The token of his surrender to her. A small amulet in the shape of a scythe. He was forced to clutch it as his mortal body died, sealing his spirit to her service. It is the one thing that represents her authority over him. Where is it? She looked at me with pity. Where is the heart of her power in that place? Where have you gone every dawn to beg for your life? It has been waiting for you, right under your nose. The shrine. The object that could bind him was at the very place I had been praying for salvation. Chapter 14. The final confrontation, the final night had come. The eve of Dia de los Muertos. The air in the panteón was electric, humming with a power that made the hair on my arms stand up. The veil between worlds was not just thin, it was gone. The whispers of the Almas and Pena were a constant chorus, and shadows danced everywhere. I walked through the chaos with a strange sense of calm. I had the cigar case and the brand in a small satchel. My destination was the shrine to Santa Muerte. The Nawal hound did not attack. As I approached the shrine, the shadows coalesced, rising up into the form of a man. Ignacio. He stood as he must have in life, tall, proud, dressed in the fine clothing of a bygone era, his spectral form radiating an aura of immense power and arrogance. The little rat comes to the altar. He sneered, his voice a cold echo. You have my trinkets. Do you think you can command me with my own property? I ignored him, my eyes fixed on the statue of Santa Muerte. At its base, nestled amongst the offerings of flowers and candles, lay a small, dark object I had never noticed before. Amulet, shaped like a tiny scythe, carved from obsidian. As I reached for it, Ignacio's form flickered in front of me, blocking my path. I will offer you a choice, he said, a cruel smile on his spectral face. Leave now, walk out of these gates and never return. I will grant you your life. My influence will, of course, spread beyond these walls. The town will know a fear they have long forgotten. But you will live. And the other choice? I asked, my voice steady. Attempt this foolish ritual. Challenge me at the feet of my mistress. You will fail, and your soul will become a permanent part of my collection. I looked past him, at the cold, impassive face of the statue. I thought of the Karandra. I thought of the promise I made to my sister. I will not run, I said. I lunged for the amulet. Ignacio roared, his form dissolving into a vortex of shadow, but I was faster. My fingers closed around the cold obsidian scythe. I now held all three objects. I knelt before the shrine and placed them in a triangle at the statue's base. The silver cigar case of his vanity, the iron brand of his cruelty, the obsidian scythe of his death. It is done, I whispered. Chapter 15. The warden, the three objects began to glow, a faint, sickly light that pulsed in time with my heartbeat. The ground trembled. A vortex of cold energy began to form around Ignacio's spirit, pulling at him. He screamed, a sound of rage and disbelief. But it wasn't enough. His power was too immense, his roots in this soil too deep. The binding was failing. I could feel it. The Karandra's words came back to me. A pact must be balanced. A wave of absolute cold, far beyond any I had felt before, washed over me. The world fell silent. The statue of Santa Muerte seemed to fix its hollow eyes on me. It was her presence, her power, her judgment. The ritual needed more. It needed a payment. To bind a powerful soul like Ignacio, another soul had to be offered to balance the scales. A warden had to take his place. My life? I could offer my life. But as I looked at the impassive face of Saint Death, I knew that wasn't the most precious thing I had. My grief. My love for my sister, Elena. That was the core of me. It was the pain that drove me, the memory that gave my struggle meaning. It was the one thing that was truly mine. And I closed my eyes and spoke, not with my voice, but with my soul, directing my thoughts to the cold presence before me. You need a warden for this place, a soul to keep the pact, I offered. Take mine, but not my life. Take my memory of her. Take my grief. Let her soul be free of this world, truly at peace. In exchange, I will stay. I will watch this place, but let me do it without the pain that anchors me to the past. It was the ultimate sacrifice, not to die, but to live on, hollowed out, forgetting the only person I had ever truly loved. To become a ghost while still breathing. She accepted. The cold intensified for a single, agonizing moment. It was not a physical cold, but a spiritual one, a blade of absolute zero carving through my soul. I felt a part of myself being scooped out, a raw, vital piece of my being excised with surgical precision. The memory of Elena's face, the sound of her laughter, the warmth of her hand in mine. It all dissolved into a gray, featureless void. The energy from the shrine exploded outwards. Ignacio let out one final, agonized scream as he was ripped from the air and pulled down into the earth, his form dissipating like smoke. The binding held. The curse was contained. The sun rose. The panteón was quiet. For the first time, it felt truly peaceful. The oppressive weight was gone. The whispers were silenced. The air was cleaned and I stood up, my satchel of Ignacio's things feeling like nothing more than old junk. I was the new Trabajador del Panteón, the warden. I had survived. Santo Perdido was safe. I walked towards the gate as the first rays of dawn touched the tops of the tombstones. I passed a small grave adorned with fresh simpasicil, their vibrant orange a testament to someone's love and remembrance. I looked at the bright, beautiful flowers, and I felt nothing at all.